Hey guys, the Comics Kid 2099 here. A while back, I did several videos back to back. It was when I was wearing my Magneto Was Right t-shirt, which you saw in one of the earlier videos that I did, and I filmed a review of Arrow Season 2, and I wasn't happy with my review. It was very scatterbrained. I was all over the place with it. I really didn't like the way that it turned out. I wound up repeating myself several times in that video, and so I decided to scrap that version of this review and start over. So this is hopefully my official review of Arrow Season 2. I did a review of Arrow Season 1, so I decided to go ahead and do a review of Arrow Season 2 since it's been out on Netflix for 4 or 5 months now. It was shortly after Season 3 started airing that Season 2 came up on Netflix. So I've written myself some notes so that I don't forget what I want to say, and I'm just going to go straight down the list here and talk about the good stuff and the bad stuff. Admittedly, I hate to say this, but there's a lot more bad stuff than good stuff. I'm going to go ahead and start with, there's one thing, if you've seen the show ever, any one episode even, you know that from the beginning they've been doing flashbacks showing what Ollie is doing 5 years previously, and then stuff going on in the present day. So Season 1, we were seeing flashbacks showing his first year on the island, and then stuff that was going on his first year after coming back to Starling City. And then Season 2 is showing what's going on his second year on the island and his second year after coming back to Starling City. And one thing I really liked about Season 1 was that the flashback stuff, in each individual episode, it would thematically parallel what was going on in the present day, but you didn't really have plot stuff connected to what was going on in the present day. You had Edward Fires doing this big evil bad guy plan on the island, and we find out in Season 2 that he was working with Amanda Waller, but we don't really have anything that's going on in Season 1 that's connected to what's going on in the present day, which is Malcolm Merlyn trying to destroy a good part of Starling City. In Season 2, that changes, where the stuff that's going on the island in Oliver's second year on the island, that stuff is all connected to what's going on in the present day in Starling City. And a little bit of a spoiler for Season 3, but they're continuing that tradition with Season 3, where the stuff that's happening to Oliver in his third year in Hell, that is connected to what's going on in the present day in the city. And I don't like that. I really wish that this show had been consistent. If they were going to do that, then I wish that Season 1, the flashback stuff, was connected to what was going on in the present day. But actually, what I really wish they would do is just not connect the flashback stuff to what's going on in the present day. Now, admittedly, when they set up Slade in the Season 1 flashbacks, eventually we all knew that he was going to become a bad guy, and it makes quite a bit of sense that you're going to want to use him as a bad guy for a big story. You don't want to just limit him to the flashback stuff on the island, especially since every episode, most of the time, the flashbacks take up less than 1/4 of an episode. So you want to really take advantage of the fact that you've got Slade Wilson in this show. So it makes sense that if he turns evil in the flashbacks, which, spoiler, in this season he does, if he turns evil in the flashbacks, then eventually he's going to come to the city and he's going to try and get revenge on Ollie for whatever. And they do that, but I feel like they didn't have to make it so that everything that happens to Oliver in his 5 years away from Starling City is eventually going to come back to bite him in the butt 5 years later in the city. I really feel like that's a little silly the way it's handled, but at the same time, if you wanted to have Slade Wilson be a major bad guy in this series, which I think we all did want that when we found out that he was going to be in this show, when you want that to happen, there's not really a good way to make it happen. Brother Blood and Isabella serve no purpose at all in this series. For almost the first half of this season, we have this guy, Brother Blood. By day, he is a city alderman, and he is eventually planning to run for mayor, and by night, he has this really terrifying skull mask, and he has all of these, he has this drug called Mirakuru, which is something that was going on in the island in Season 2. It's basically this super soldier serum, and it kills most of the people who take it, and he's trying to create an army. Well, then we find out, close to the mid-season finale, that Brother Blood is actually working for Slade Wilson, and Slade Wilson got the Mirakuru in his body in the flashbacks in this season, and that's where Brother Blood is getting the Mirakuru. The problem is, there's absolutely no character reason for Slade to have Brother Blood working for him. There's really no reason at all that Slade even needs Brother Blood. He has the Mirakuru. All he has to do is find people to inject it with and find a way to inject people with it without it killing them. Brother Blood does not provide any of that. There's absolutely no reason for him to be in this show other than they wanted to save the Slade Wilson reveal until closer to the mid-season finale, and so they needed a bad guy in this show to kind of distract the audiences until Slade Wilson comes into the show. And that's the reason that he's here, but from a character point of view, that makes absolutely no sense at all. There's no reason that he needs to be here. The same is true for Isabella Rochev, and she's a character played by Summer Glau, and Summer Glau is fantastic as this character, but the reason that she's in the show, we find out a little closer to the end of the season, is that she's working for Slade this whole time, and she really hates the Queen family because she was Robert Queen's mistress, and we find out that eventually, at one point, Robert Queen was going to run away with her, and then he decides to go back to his family, so she wants to get revenge on the Queen family. Somehow she met up with Slade Wilson. We're never told how they met or how they both found out that they had a mutual enemy, but she, when she's first introduced, she is a co-CEO of Queen Consolidated with Ollie. And for about half the season or a little more, that's all she is. She's just kind of a rude, career-minded co-CEO. And we don't really have any idea that she's a bad guy, although I remember as this show was coming out, episode by episode, I do remember several people suggesting that she might be working with Slade, and that ended up being true. But the problem is, Slade's big goal here, he wants to take everything away from Oliver. He wants to take away members of his family. Spoiler, he kills Moira Queen. He wants to take away his company, which he does through Isabel Rochev. And then at the end of the season, we find out that he is releasing all of these Mirakuru soldiers that he has so that Argus will have no other choice but to nuke the entire city to contain the threat. He wants to take away the entire city from Oliver. So that begs the question, what is the purpose of him taking Queen Consolidated via Isabel Rochev if he's just going to destroy the entire city? That doesn't make any sense. Now, I guess you might be saying, well, some of that money might be in bank accounts that are outside of the city, so if he destroyed the city and Oliver somehow survived, then he would still have some of his money. Maybe that makes sense, but it's still really stupid that the only purpose that Isabel Rochev serves is to take the company, which is just going to be destroyed anyway when Slade tries to destroy the entire city. Not to mention, the Slade-Isabel thing reminds me a great deal of The Dark Knight Rises, where Slade is Bane and Isabel is Talia al Ghul from The Dark Knight Rises. In The Dark Knight Rises, Talia is pretending to be a different woman, and she essentially gains the trust of Bruce Wayne and then pulls his company out from under him with the help of Bane. They're working together secretly, and then it's like, whoa, twist ending. Kind of the same thing going on here, although I will say that Slade is considerably more of a mastermind here than in The Dark Knight Rises. In The Dark Knight Rises, Bane was basically just a tool of Talia. This reveal is kind of just straight up theft from The Dark Knight Rises, and a lot of other people have made the mention that this series has a really bad habit of stealing a lot of stuff from the Christopher Nolan Batman movies, and in Season 3, spoiler, but we have Ra's al Ghul, who was in 2 of the Batman movies by Christopher Nolan. And I feel like there's enough stuff in the DC Universe that you don't have to constantly be stealing stuff from those movies, especially when it is a straight-up reveal/twist ending, and the characters straight up parallel to characters in those movies. Brother Blood's mask even kind of sort of looks like the Scarecrow's mask from Batman Begins. That is kind of inexcusable. And while we're on the topic of characters who really don't serve any function, a lot of the good guys in this series, they've kind of lost their way, and they don't really serve any function anymore. All of Season 1, Detective Lance, his thing that he did for that whole season was trying to hunt down the Vigilante. And then, at the very end of the season, he kind of forms this alliance with the Vigilante where he realizes that he doesn't need to hunt him down because the Vigilante is doing good things. This season, he doesn't really have anything to do anymore. Basically, anytime there is any crime whatsoever, he is just the uniformed cop who is there at the crime scene. That's his purpose in this series. He really doesn't have anything to keep him here. And honestly, I like the actor, but there was no reason for them to keep this character in this show. Laurel Lance is another character who doesn't really have a purpose here anymore, especially since in Season 1, her big thing was working with the Vigilante, and now she's kind of switched on that, and now she's trying to capture the Vigilante, at least at first. And her big thing this whole season is she is an alcoholic. She's working with this really nice, upbeat job as a DA's assistant, and then they fire her because she's on pills and she's an alcoholic, and then by the end of the season, she basically blackmails her way into getting her job back. That's her purpose in this season. She really doesn't have anything to do in this series, and if she had some kind of relationship with one of the characters in the show, other than just being a hostile jerk to everybody, then I would feel like she serves more of a purpose here. But she really feels kind of extraneous and worthless, and we don't really need to keep her in the show. Another character, it really pains me to say it, but John Diggle. When almost every single cast member in this entire series knows that Oliver Queen is the Arrow, John Diggle kind of loses a lot of what made him work at the beginning of season 1. For like the first half of season 1, Diggle was like the only person who knew that Oliver was the Arrow, and so they kind of had a partnership thing where he served a purpose. Quite often, he was helping Oliver do stuff, but then when you have Felicity and Roy Harper and Sarah, I'll get to her in a minute, and eventually Laurel, when they all find out that Oliver is the Arrow, it kind of leaves John Diggle with nothing to do. These are all characters who they're just kind of sitting around watching the plot happen, and they don't really have stuff to keep them busy and stuff to keep them in the show or give them a reason to stay in the show. And it pains me because 2 out of those 3 characters are characters that I really like. Laurel is a character who needs to die in a fire. I don't like her at all, but if she had some reason to stay in the show, then I would at least be okay with her being in the show. But she doesn't, and I'm not. And with characters like John Diggle, it almost feels like the people behind the show were aware that he didn't really have any reason to stay in the show anymore. So at the end of this season, they drop a bomb on us and they say that him and Lila are going to have a baby. And then in season 3, they have the baby. And you would think this would be his new thing. He's going to be a father. And at the very beginning of the season, he's like, yeah, I'm going to basically quit. I'm not going to be your part of Team Arrow anymore. I'm just going to be a father full time. And then something happens at the close to the beginning of season 3 where he's like, I need to help you guys. You still need me. And it still feels like he doesn't really have a purpose in the show. We see that he has a baby, but that doesn't really give him anything to do. That would have been a really good way to give him a good exit from the show. He has a baby now. He can't be involved with this kind of lifestyle. But that's part of season 3. I'm not even going to get into that. I'm trying to review season 2 here, and I've still got a whole bunch of stuff that I want to talk about, so I need to just get to that. Another thing that I really don't like, the next one on my list, Olicity. That is the shipping, the pairing, the whatever you want to call it, of Oliver Queen and Felicity Smoke. Felicity Smoke was introduced in season 1 as basically the kind of sort of ally to Team Arrow. There were several episodes where Oliver would come to her for help on something, and she didn't even know that he was the Arrow. And it was several episodes before he revealed his identity to her, and even towards the end of season 1, she was still mostly just kind of on the side, offering help when it was needed. There was like one episode in season 1 where she was a main integral part of the story for that episode, and other than that, she was basically just there when they needed an IT girl. Season 2, her importance is conflated to be much more than it ever was in season 1, to the point where I get to where I don't like this character. And in season 1, I liked her a lot. She was kind of, I don't want to say ditzy because she's very smart, but she acted very ditzy. She would say these really dumb, funny things where it's like, ooh, that sounded wrong once I said it. She did that a lot. I thought she was a fun little character. She was a nice side character. They can use her when necessary, but she doesn't have to be a main part of this series. And they have straight up admitted in the special features on Arrow Season 1, there was like a 40-minute panel at a Comic-Con or something. They straight up admitted that when they first introduced this character, they did not have big plans for her. And then everyone on the internet, including one of the CEOs of the CW, was like, hey, I really like the blonde IT girl. So they made her more important as the series went on, to the point where, like I say, I don't like her anymore. There's several episodes in this season where she is just straight up mean to Oliver, where she says and does things that are very catty, and it makes me less liking her character. I like her less and less as the series goes on. And by the end of this season, we find out that she and Oliver, they've been kind of hinting this relationship between these two for a while. A lot of people, as far back as season 1, were wanting them to get together because she very clearly had a crush on Oliver, but he very clearly did not see her that way. And I liked that. I liked that he saw her as a little sister who wasn't a jerk like Thea. I liked that they had kind of a big brother, little sister dynamic going on. I do not like that this show wants to put them together as a couple. And season 3 kind of plays with that a little bit more, and then it sort of kind of dashes the hopes of people who like the Olicity pairing, but it also kind of continues to play with it a little bit more, and it's just frustrating because these two did not ever seem like they would work as a couple in season 1, and then it's like they want to change this dynamic just to make this fan base happy, and it just doesn't work. It really aggravated me when they tried to make her more and more important, to the point of even making her a primary love interest for Oliver in season 3. But again, I'm not reviewing Season 3, I'm reviewing Season 2, but a lot of that got its start here in Season 2. There's specifically a few scenes in this season where they're trying to play it up as like they both love each other, but they can't really say anything about it, and I hate it. I cannot stand that relationship as it is. I really liked it whenever it was a big brother, little sister thing. When they're trying to be lovey with each other, that does not work for me. One big problem that this season had was that it felt like it needed to go bigger and better than the end of the previous season. And the problem with that is, when the previous season ends with a good portion of Starling City getting exploded and leveled by an earthquake machine, it's kind of hard to go bigger and better. And yet this show tries to do that. So we've got like 50 people or more who are injected with this Mirakuru super soldier program thing, and they're all kind of running around destroying everything, and it feels like they've kind of written themselves into a hole. It's like, uh-oh, what do we do? How are we going to get out of this? So out of nowhere, they introduced this cure that we had no idea this cure even existed. And it's kind of like the Chekhov's gun thing. If you're going to shoot a gun at the end of Act 3, you have to introduce the gun in Act 1. They don't do that. They don't introduce this cure for the Mirakuru when they introduce the Mirakuru near the beginning of the season. They introduce this Mirakuru, and they act like this is just Mirakuru. It's super soldier stuff. And then when they find out that they're going to have to get rid of all of these super soldier guys who are running around the city, it's like, okay, maybe we need a cure. Let's just throw that in there. It's really sloppy the way that it's handled, and this season finale, it feels really sloppy because of that partly. And I'm not going to lie, also the season finale feels kind of sloppy because they've got a lot of these plot threads that they were trying to juggle. Some of them they managed to land okay, some of them not so much, but I'll get into all of that if I can throughout the rest of this video. But getting back to how this season feels like it needs to end bigger and better than Season 1 did, I feel like Season 3 almost suffers because of that. It feels like they realized at the end of Season 2, hey, if we keep going with this, we're eventually going to have to blow up the planet in this show just to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and we can't keep doing that. And so Season 3, in a lot of ways, it really feels like they tried to dial it back, and it just doesn't work because, at least in the first half of Season 3, there's really not much of a plot at all. And I know, I keep saying I'm not reviewing Season 3, I'm just reviewing Season 2. But a lot of the problems in Season 3 kind of have their start in Season 2, especially the way this season ended and kind of feeds into Season 3. Let me talk a little bit about the plot that's going on in the flashbacks on the island. At the very beginning of this season, we got this guy, Professor Ivo. He's a character from the comics. I have no idea if the Professor Ivo in Arrow is anything like the Professor Ivo in the comics, but he is looking for Mirakuru, which is this Japanese super soldier drug. I've talked about it quite a bit in this video. And he sends his people on the island, and as soon as these people see Oliver, Shadow, and Slade, as soon as they see them, they attack. And that made absolutely no sense to me. And I get, if you are on this ship and you are going all over the Pacific Ocean trying to find this Mirakuru that was on a Japanese sub from World War II, if you see anyone, maybe they're an enemy. Maybe they already have the Mirakuru and they know what it is, and if they have it, they're not going to try and give it to you, so you want to attack. I guess, but have you ever heard the phrase, you can attract more flies with honey than manure? These guys just randomly attacking Oliver and Shadow and Slade without any provocation just because they're the bad guys, that really didn't work for me. It didn't make any sense at all. At least in Season 1, the reason that Eddie Fires did not want Oliver to leave the island was because he thought that Oliver knew what he was up to. That makes sense. These guys just attacking the good guys for no reason at all, that does not make sense. And then later on, after Oliver and Slade and Shadow, they've kind of determined, yeah, these people are really up to no good, we have to fight them. After they've determined that, they steal the Mirakuru, or they try to steal it, and eventually Ivo gets the Mirakuru. And this is after they've already injected Slade with it, and after Ivo already has the Mirakuru, and we are told through another character who I'm going to get to in a minute, we are told that the reason Ivo wants the Mirakuru is to save the human race. And eventually we find out that his wife has amnesia and she doesn't even remember him, and he wants to use the Mirakuru to try and save her mind so that he can have his wife back. And that's a noble gesture. The problem is, Ivo is written as a one-dimensional, evil bad guy who just twirls his mustache because he's evil, mwahaha. At one point, after Ivo already has the Mirakuru, he decides that he's going to screw with Oliver for no real reason whatsoever. He has Shadow and he has Sarah, who I promise I'm going to get to her. She's on my list towards the bottom. And he says, these are the two girls that you care for, Oliver. I'm going to kill one of them, and you get to choose which one I'm going to kill. For no real reason at all. Now, I get that the hero's choice thing is a big thing in superhero movies. It's in the first Spider-Man movie, it's in Batman Forever, it's in The Dark Knight. This is a big thing in superhero movies and superhero stories in general. And I get the feeling that this whole hero's choice thing where Oliver has to choose which of these girls that Ivo is going to kill, they wanted to kind of echo that. But the problem is, Ivo has no reason to do this. He already has what he wants, and at this point, I don't feel sorry for him when we later find out that his wife has amnesia. He is an evil psychopath who just wants to kill people to get what he wants, and he's not an interesting bad guy. I feel like Eddie Fires, his evil plan that we find out it's not really his evil plan, but his plan in season 1, it's evil, but I feel like it's interesting, and Ivo just wanting the Mirakuru to cure his wife, I get the feeling they're wanting to make him sympathetic, but it's too late because he killed a woman that Oliver loved just to screw with him, just to mess around with him for no reason at all other than he's the bad guy and he has to twirl his mustache and be the bad guy. And this was definitely one of my absolute least favorite parts of the season, which is saying quite a bit because a lot of this season is really bad. Now, again, I say that this thing, they set it up here where Ivo kills Shadow, and then later on in the season, Slade, he's really mad at Oliver because he was in love with Shadow, and I'll get to that in a second, and so he makes Oliver choose if he's going to kill Thea or Moria Queen, and he ends up killing Moria because she volunteers for it. And I get that they were wanting to set that up with this thing that Ivo did in the past, but the reason that Ivo did it makes no sense. There is no motivation behind it. He does it because the script needs him to do it. And that is the worst kind of character decisions in any kind of story. Okay, finally, I'm going to be talking about Sarah. All throughout season 1, a lot of the characters in the city when Oliver gets back are mad at him because he took Sarah Lance with him on the Queen's Gambit, which then crashed, and he believed that Sarah had died. At least, that's what we're told. Detective Lance and Laurel, they were both furious at him because Sarah died, basically because of Oliver. And then we find out in season 2 that Sarah is actually alive. She survived the Queen's Gambit. She was picked up by Ivo around the same time that Oliver landed on the island, so she's been with him for a year, and then in the present day, she comes back to the city to find out if her family is okay because of the earthquake at the end of season 1, and she is the Black Canary. Now, I'm going to go ahead and say, on the island, Sarah is really annoying and really ditzy and just a character I don't really like. In the present day, she is easily one of my favorites. She is by far my favorite version of the Black Canary. Now, I'm not this huge Black Canary fan or anything like that, but she is definitely my favorite version of the Black Canary, and she has a very interesting backstory. At least there's parts of her backstory that we know. There's a lot of it that we don't know because she's been away from home for 5 years, or actually 6 years, just like Oliver's been away for 5. And when she was introduced and eventually she and Oliver kind of become romantically involved in the present day, I was ready for this show to just get rid of all of the other supporting characters and for this to just be Oliver and Sarah on the road fighting crime. I would have been hugely okay with that. Unfortunately, they don't go in that direction, but I can't decide if the actress, Katie Watts, I can't decide if she's a bad actress or if she's just not good at playing the dumb blonde that she is in the flashbacks. Because in the flashbacks, I really can't stand her. And I'm not sure if that's because she's really good at playing bad or if she's just not really good at playing that. Because she was in another movie that I reviewed a while back called The Machine, and in that, at the beginning of the movie, she plays a human being, and I really didn't think she was very good at playing that role, but then, in the last half of the movie, she's playing a robot, a cyborg, and I thought she was fantastic as the cyborg. So, this seems to be her thing, where she's playing the same character or a very similar character, and she's really good some of the time, and then she's not so good at it some of the other times. And I didn't like her when she was on the island. I thought she had some of the worst dialogue, and some of the dialogue that she had just wasn't acted very well. But then, in the present day, I like her a whole lot more. I really wish that this series had just kept her as part of the cast, because at the very end of the season, for no real reason at all, they decide, well, we need to get rid of the Black Canary, so she's going to go back to the League of Assassins. I didn't mention that, but at some point in her 6 years being away from home, she was a part of the League of Assassins. And again, I thought that was a very interesting development. It's not something that ever happened in the comics. Black Canary was never part of the League of Assassins in the comics, but I thought it was a very interesting development, a really neat twist to take the character in this show. And then, for some reason, they wanted to break up Oliver and Sarah at the end of the season, and so they have her go back to the League of Assassins for no real reason. And it kind of sort of feeds into something that's going on in season 3, which I'm not going to talk about, but that's just, one of those things. Personally, I wish they had kept her in the show. I thought she was really great in the present day, and I would have really liked to have seen her just be one of the main characters and even replace several of the supporting characters that are in this show. I said that I was going to talk a little bit about Slade's motivation. In the flashbacks, we find out that Oliver and Shadow, in the 5 or so months since the end of season 1, they have become an item, and they are now in love with each other. We find out that Slade is also in love with Shadow, but of course, he's not doing anything about it. He's not even going to mention it. Well, then there's a period of time where Oliver is captive on Ivo's boat, and Slade has been severely burned on his face, and then Shadow and him are alone on the island, and he basically tells her that he's in love with her. Well, then when Ivo comes back, that's around the time when Sarah and Oliver get back on the island. Ivo kills Shadow, and then Slade, he's basically like, yeah, I'm going to kill that guy because he killed Shadow. Well, then he finds out much later in the season that Oliver was kind of sort of responsible for choosing to save Sarah and not choosing to save Shadow. And the big problem that I have with this, there is absolutely no story reason that Oliver and Shadow even had to be dating. Yes, there was one episode in season 1 where they kissed for a little bit and then they're like, oh, this is a bad idea, we shouldn't do that. They could have just ignored that and said, well, they were a little bit attracted to each other, and started this season with Slade and Shadow being an item. I think that would have worked a whole lot better, and then when Ivo has his you have to choose which one I'm going to shoot, then it would have made a lot more sense that Oliver jumps in front of Sarah because he's not dating Shadow. And then Slade's whole motivation of the woman I loved is now dead, I'm going to kill whoever's responsible, it makes a whole lot more sense because he was dating her for several months and then she's dead. All of that would have worked a lot better if they had just started this season with Slade dating Shadow instead of Oliver dating Shadow. It really didn't make any sense the way that they did it. I also want to say it doesn't make a lot of sense that Slade holds this vendetta over Oliver for 5 years and then comes back in season 2 to basically ruin Oliver's life. I get that the woman he loved died, but we're at first told that the Mirakuru is maybe making him crazy. But then when he gets stabbed with the cure, he says, no, I still hate you. I was just going on hate this whole time. And on the one hand, I think it works. I think Slade, or rather Manu Bennett, who plays Slade, he is fantastic as Slade. He is a great Slade Wilson. He really made me love the character a lot more than I did before, and I always thought he was a pretty cool bad guy, but he really made me dig the character a lot more. But I feel like his motivation could have used a little bit of work, and again, that goes back to there's no reason that Slade and Shadow could not have been dating when they were on the island. The last item that I have on my list. In the beginning of this season, we have 3-ish episodes where Barry Allen is introduced, and by this point, the people behind the show already knew that they were going to be doing a Flash TV show, and for some reason, they thought that they needed to do sort of a backdoor pilot in Arrow Season 2. And I have to say, if they had gotten rid of all the Flash stuff and just set up the Flash in his own season, in his own series, then I think this season may have been a little bit stronger. They would have had 2 full episodes that they could have fleshed out some of these ideas that they were working with over the entire season, but instead, they had to set up the stuff with the Flash, and I think that made this season weaker. Now, it made Flash Season 1 a lot stronger because they could just hit the ground running, pun definitely intended, but it made this season quite a bit weaker because it had to spend time setting that up when it also had a lot of other things that it had to set up, and those things I feel like suffered more because they were having to spend time on the Flash. I want to end this review by saying that I didn't completely hate this season. There were a lot of things about this season that I really loved. I think most of the acting is pretty good. Sarah Lance as the Black Canary in the present day, she's fantastic. I love Manu Bennett as Slade. I thought that Summer Glau as Isabel Rochev was really good. I really love a lot of the acting here, and there are several individual episodes here that I really love. The episode with the Suicide Squad I thought was really great. The episode where in the present day Slade is taking a tour of the Queen Mansion, and in the flashbacks he, Oliver, and Shadow are taking the boat. I thought that was a fantastic episode. That was my favorite episode of the entire series. There were some really good episodes in this season, but as a whole, the season just does not work. It's really sloppy. It doesn't feel like they were really planning that far ahead. It almost feels like they planned halfway into the season, and then after they got halfway in, they didn't really realize where they wanted to go from there, and it feels very choppy. It doesn't really feel like they planned it out very far or didn't plan it out very well. It's very sad that this season was that bad, but I still kept watching halfway into Season 3, and I made a Facebook post a few weeks ago that I am not going to be watching Season 3 anymore. When that show comes back from its break, I have dropped this show because it just stayed bad. After Season 2 ended, where it was really bad, it just kept staying bad, and Season 3 has been abysmal, and I hate to say it because this show was good. The first half of season 2 was amazing. The last half of season 1 was amazing. And now this show just doesn't feel like it knows where it wants to go. And that's really sad because once upon a time I really liked this show. And I feel like it's made me more of a Green Arrow fan than I was. And I already liked quite a few Green Arrow stories. Not a whole lot of them, but several. And so sadly, I'm going to be dropping this show with season 3. I'm not going to be watching it anymore. So a year from now, you're not going to be seeing a season 3 review from me. I may come back anytime they decide to do a Suicide Squad episode or a Slade episode. If Slade ever comes back for an episode or two, I'll definitely come back to watch those episodes. But watching it on a regular basis, I think those days are gone for me. So that's all I have to say. This has been an immensely long video. I apologize for that. I had a whole lot that I wanted to say. I wanted to cover everything that I could possibly think of. That's why I wrote my notes here. So what did you guys think of this season of Arrow? Did you like it as much as I did, which is to say not a whole lot? Did you like it a lot more than I did? Let me know in the comments below. And if you liked this review, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And that's about all I have to say. So I will see you guys later with a different kind of video. Catch you then.